everybody, my name is Allie Shook and I'm the Watershed Outreach Coordinator for the Fountain Creek Watershed Flood Control and Greenway District.
And I'm Maggie Gaddis, the Executive Director of the Colorado Native Plant Society.
So today we're going to take you through our native garden grant process and show you the great results that we had for the first year of this public native garden. We would like to start off by thanking the Landscaping with Colorado Native Plants Conference for selecting our project for a grant. We were thrilled to receive it, and this would not have happened without your support. So we'll move on to the next slide. First, I'm going to share some background on this partnership and how it came into being. I'll talk about some of our expected challenges, how we managed those, and some of the opportunities that we identified at the beginning of the project, as well as some that manifested through the growing season. Maggie's going to talk about plant selection and sourcing. She'll share how we manage the watering and maintenance through a very dry summer. And finally, Maggie will share our thoughts about future plans for this public garden. So the Fountain Creek Watershed District is a special governmental district charged with protecting and enhancing the health of our home watershed, which runs from Palmer Lake to Pueblo. This is one of the most erratic watersheds in the country, given the extremes in topography. We have a 10,000-foot elevation change in just 70 miles. Our variations in geology and ecological habitats, weather patterns, and population growth. And as a result, we have a lot of issues. A healthy watershed supports everything in your community: the economy, recreation, wildlife, plant life, the water we drink and use every day. You've probably seen a lot of these news articles on water lately around water shortages and droughts and low reservoirs, climate changes leading to increased intensity and numbers of wildfires, impacts on water quality from a variety of sources. And it can be really overwhelming once you start to think about all these big problems. Unfortunately, in Colorado Springs, we don't have a botanic garden or an arboretum, and there is just a lack of native gardens for the public to see what is possible in their landscapes. Publics are an incredible asset. They're a teaching tool. They support pollinators. They engage the surrounding neighborhood. And so when Maggie and I discovered this grant opportunity, our wheels got to spinning, and we thought a new native garden could really serve our local community well for years to come, in addition to providing those free ecosystem services. Next slide. So the Catamount Institute is a local nonprofit that connects kids to the outdoors. They engage thousands of youth all year round in educational outdoor adventures. Their site had an old garden that had been abandoned many years ago. It was dedicated to Kathleen, who is a pioneering botanist who propagated plants that she collected from Pikes Peak and surrounding high alpine areas. And she introduced these plants to gardeners in both the United States as well as abroad. She lived nearby the park from 1916 to 1948. The site itself gets full sun, has lots of opportunity, and can serve as an educational garden for the youth and public. So we inquired with Catamount to see if we could take over this plot, and they quickly signed on to be a partner and allowed for that space to be replanted. We scoped out the project, got all of our partners on board, including the City of Colorado Springs Parks Department, since it's technically city land, and we put our application together. Next slide. So some of the challenges we identified included the need to do a lot of work up front. We established regular volunteer days every week and invited our volunteers to help with every step of the way, which Maggie will talk about here coming up. The garden itself is a public park, which has been known to be vandalized and had some theft in the past. So with our watering, we had to hide our watering key and our tools, but we didn't see any damage to the new space, which was great. We also wanted to, of course, incorporate education along the way. So we invited the Catamount Institute and their summer camp programs, University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, as well as Colorado College students to use the garden as a teaching tool. Next slide, and I'll turn it over to Maggie.
Yeah, so one of our challenges, but also great rewards, was the efforts we had to put forth to gain the plant materials. And so this year we had planned to partner with other nonprofits, the Colorado Native Plant Society and their native plant sale, and then also local Horticultural Art Society native plant sale. We also supported our local nurseries, Rick's Garden Center, and we received some donations from Colorado Native Plant Society members who gave us plant materials from their own landscapes. So we did not intend to work in so many avenues to gain the plant materials, but that's what it takes. That's what it took to get the plant materials. And I think that was one of the greatest challenges, but in the process, we gained volunteers, right? We volunteered for the Horticultural Arts Society plant sale, and then we gained volunteers for our garden project. And we worked to prepare the site and plant it all throughout the summer. We, didn't leave the site completely bare and then do all the planting at once. We were gaining the plants over several weeks, having our volunteer days and getting it done. And it was always fun because all of our volunteers were able to engage in all the processes of gardening rather than having really specific framework of what happens on this day, this day, this day. We had to be flexible. And we had so many wonderful volunteers from so many avenues. We had city volunteers, we had Horticultural Arts Society volunteers, Colorado Native Plant Society volunteers. We had an Honor Society student up here in the right, Madeline, who is our most frequently attending volunteer all summer. And we had UCCS students in the lower right who were also helping us with the garden. We engaged them in planting, mulching, watering, weeding, and doing some really ugly site prep work. So under the dormant garden that had been neglected, there was black plastic. And what we found was that on top of the black plastic, there was some decent decomposing mulch. But if you look in that tiny picture in the middle, it was very heavily laden with weed seeds. So we did the grunt work to pull back the black plastic. And what we found underneath was just, these are riparian soils, so pretty clayey, but the native soils, we did not add any amendments. And you can see that the only thing under the black plastic was the bindweed. So we did have a bindweed problem. We tried to pull as many of these roots as we could. Then we raked the site and watered it, raked the site, and spread the city reclamation seed mix, which is 10 native grass species. We also interplanted into the seeding effort those grass plugs that were donated by a CONIPS member. And you can see this picture in the bottom middle. This is in late July, just about a month after we started the seeding effort, and we had great germination results. And you can see over in the bottom right, there's the cover in the fall, and we're really looking forward to seeing how this grows over time. The species we used were all native grasses, including big blue stem, little blue stem, switchgrass, side oats grama, blue grama, buffalo grass, green needle grass, Indian rice grass. And then the interspacing were for common forbs in a full sun environment. Now you can see before and after. So, the site on the left, that's the black plastic with the mulch and the weeds on top. You can see smooth brome there in the green patches. And in the end, we were able to really restore this garden to a formal perennial garden in the upper space here that you're seeing on the right. So we planted amoebas of native plants. We purchased roughly 5 individuals per species so that they would make nice islands, which is really important for pollinators, that the design has large islands of the same species. It's not really varied, changing the species every 2 feet in the landscape. And then what you see here are colored rocks, and this was part of our youth engagement. We engaged the Catamount students to paint the rocks, and we wrote the names of the plants on them, but we've just since decided it just doesn't look quite as nice as we wanted to, but we put together a brochure that also covers the plant identification in kind of a scavenger hunt sort of way. And what we still hope to accomplish is to work with our local Concrete Couch, which is a repurposed art organization, to build a bench for the site. We don't have a lot of seating opportunities here. You can walk around and that's it. But we would love for people to be able to enjoy this and spend a bit more time. And we also have now a gardening crew. Colorado Springs has its first public garden crew. And so we are always talking about how we're going to maximize the social engagement that we've already started by continuing our work in other public spaces in 2022. And then I work at UCCS as well. I'm constantly trying to bring students in. Allie always has a Colorado College intern. And then of course we're working with Catamount Institute. So we're trying to really approach all generations in our community and engage them in this gardening effort. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we hope to take your questions, and you can always reach out to us. We hope to be mentors to the next grant recipients to help them to understand what it takes to get this kind of public garden work done. And it really was, I would say, primarily a task of volunteer coordination. What do you think, Ellie?
I would agree with that, yes. But yeah, thanks everyone for your time, and happy gardening.